Calcutta, the jewel in the crown of the empire. The colonial capital from which vast wealth was forcibly extracted back to Britain, leading to the First Indian Rebellion of 1857. Calcutta attracted itinerants of all kinds, including J.W. Newland, who arrived after travelling through a great southern arc from the United States to Central and South America, across the Pacific to New Zealand, and finally through the Australian colonies. Newland finally found success in Calcutta, but he would die in the First Rebellion, known to the British as the Mutiny. Before he died, he staged spectacular dissolving view shows in Sydney, Hobart, Launceston and Calcutta, where he hand-painted magic lantern slides projected from oxyhydrogen lanterns, dissolved one into another. His shows climaxed with two dissolving views of the most famous maritime disaster of the day, the burning of the Kent. Everybody in Newland's audience already knew the story. Now it's your turn to experience it. Every word you're about to hear is completely and absolutely true and drawn from authentic historical sources. The Kent is one of the biggest ships in the East India Company's fleet, bringing soldiers and colonists to Bengal and taking Indian wealth back to Britain. In early 1825, and the Kent sets out on her third trip with 641 souls on board, the crew, some private passengers, and 364 soldiers from the 31st Regiment, along with their wives and children. It departs loaded with plenty of gunpowder and dozens of casks of spirits for the troops to drink. One morning, not long into her journey, she is struck by a storm in the Bay of Biscay, the weight of the munitions causing her to toss and roll wildly in the sea. Fearing for the stowed spirit casks, an officer heads below deck to investigate. Holding a candle to light his way in the darkness, he discovers that one of the precious barrels has indeed broken free. officer is attending to the barrel, the Kent lurches violently as the storm intensifies, causing the officer to drop his candle. He stoops to pick it up, lets go of the barrel, and it suddenly breaks apart. The whole place was instantly ablaze. As the fire takes hold, some of the passengers begin to suffocate in the smoke. Others who are lying in their bunks below are forced to flee, almost in a state of nakedness, and are running about in a quest of husbands, children, or parents. Will not we fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof. Some of the soldiers begin to drink themselves into oblivion. Others, having now lost all hope, decide to sit on top of the gunpowder store, anticipating a mighty and inevitable explosion that would result in a mercifully quick death. Miraculously, a small brig is spotted transporting a party of 36 Cornish miners to the diggings in Mexico. The first lifeboat is loaded with women and children. Scarcely a word is uttered, not a scream can be heard. Even the infants cease to cry, as if conscious of the unspoken and unspeakable anguish that is, at that instant, rending the hearts of their parting parents. sailors who have now been sitting for hours on top of a gunpowder magazine, waiting for the explosion that will put them out of their misery, have change of heart and hurriedly decide to make for the lifeboats. Row the first lifeboat over, refuse to return to the burning ship for more survivors, but the miners won't hear of it, and they insist they won't be allowed aboard until they do. Soldiers begin to grab hold of young children and jump into the sea to swim for the lifeboats. The sailors who have now been sitting for hours on top of that gunpowder magazine, waiting for the explosion that will put them out of their misery, have a change of heart and hurriedly decide to make for the lifeboats. Some of the men, after remaining, perhaps for a while in silent abstraction, suddenly burst forth as if awakened from some terrible dream to a still more frightful reality, into a long train of loud and desponding lamentation that gradually subsides into its former stillness. The men who had decided to drink themselves into oblivion remain below deck. These miserable wretches, stretched in irrecoverable intoxication on the floor, or prowling about like beasts of prey in search of plunder. It's now late at night, and the guns stored in the hold begin to explode. The captain finally abandons his ship, leaving only those too drunk or undone by fear behind. At last, about 1:30 in the morning, the devouring element, having communicated to the magazine, the explosion was seen, and the blazing fragments of the once magnificent Kent were instantly hurried, like so many rockets, high into the air, leaving, in the comparative darkness that succeeded, the deathful scene of that disastrous day floating before the mind like some feverish dream. The following morning, some of those that had refused to abandon the ship during the storm are found alive and rescued while clinging to the mast, having somehow miraculously survived the explosion. All in all, 81 souls are lost. Soldiers, seamen, women, and children. A year and a half later, and 4,000 miles away, a bottle washes up on a beach in Barbados. It contains a message from the Kent. The ship the Kent is on fire. Elizabeth, Joanna, and myself commit our spirits into the hands of our blessed Redeemer. His grace enables us to be quite composed in the awful prospect of entering eternity. Signed, D. McGregor, March 1825, Bay of Biscay. I'm really struggling to see. Sorry, folks. Give me a second. Things are getting wet. The way was long and weary, but gallantly they strode. A country lad and lassie along the weary road. The night was dark and stormy, but blithe of heart were they, but shining in the distance, the lights of London lay. Oh, gleaming faces worn and weary, they told of sorrows low. One day a man and woman crept down a country road. They saw their native village, heartbroken from the fray. They shined